Hello and welcome to Long Live Hooky Street, the podcast where we rewatch and discuss every episode of Britain's most beloved TV comedy, Only Fools and Horses. I'm Jenny and I'm joined from Hong Kong by my co-host and sister Heather. Say hello, dude.
Hi, everyone.
Today we are discussing Series 3, Episode 1, Homesick. So grab some lovely pineapple-tasting oranges and let's get started.
So this episode aired on the BBC at 8:30 p.m. on Thursday, November 10th, 1983. Viewing figures started off strong with 9.4 million tuning in. That is strong. It was now airing after Wildlife on 1 with David Attenborough. And as always, followed by the 9 o'clock news. The UK number one song on this date was Uptown Girl by Billy Joel. Number one movie at the UK box office was James Bond Never Say Never Again, which is a Sean Connery one. Wow. As usual, Jenny has some episode facts for us this week, so let's hear those facts.
Yes, I do. So firstly, it's worth noting here that each series has started airing later in the year as the 3 years have passed. Series 1 aired from September 8th until October 13th, with over 2 months before Christmas Crackers airing. Series 2 aired from October 21st to December 2nd, with a gap of 4 weeks before the 2 Christmas episodes. And Series 3 didn't even begin airing until November 10th. Who's a Pretty Boy actually aired on December 22nd, which was only 3 days before Christmas, and then Thicker Than Water aired on Christmas Day. So I thought that was worth noting. So every series has inched forward. For Series 3, location filming started on September 2nd, 1983, and finished on the 23rd, Mum's birthday, with the studio recordings being done on Sunday evening starting October 2nd. The title of this episode was originally Homesick Blues before it was shortened to Homesick. We already know that John Sullivan would often draw upon his own experiences for episode ideas. In this case, he said that he and his wife had at one point applied for a council house and they found themselves put at the bottom of a very long list of applicants, and he discovered at that point that you would then have to have many qualifications, at least one of which would have to be concerned with illness. So he thought this would make a great storyline because he knew that Del would aspire to live somewhere nicer than Nelson Mandela House. And then finally, the Tenants Association meeting was filmed in St. Nicholas Church Hall in Chiswick, which was, interestingly, the rehearsal space that they have been using and would continue to use all the way up until 1987. So they were very familiar with that hall, the cast would. Anyway, this is the first time we're seeing it. So I'll insert the rest of the trivia into the episode breakdown. Shall we move on to the rankings for this week?
Yeah, sure, let's do that. So if you are new here, first of all, you should probably subscribe to the podcast, because we've already done the whole of Series 1 and Series 2, so you should definitely be subscribed by now. And we release a new episode every Saturday, so once a week, and each week we are going to reveal and compare our rankings for the episode. So prior to the recording of this podcast, we have independently ranked all 64 episodes, separately ranked all 64 episodes. So what is your ranking for Homesick?
My ranking for Homesick is 48.
Interesting. Very different for me this week.
Okay, and then what's your ranking, Heather?
Okay, so my ranking for this episode is 34.
Ooh, quite high.
Yeah.
43 is not that low for me, really. I don't feel. I really love this episode. I did that thing where I went back and looked why it wasn't higher, but I think this is a really strong season opener. It's a funny episode. I don't really have that many criticisms of it. It just doesn't happen to have gotten higher just based on my choice of order that I would watch in, but I love it. Yeah,
I think this episode, I agree with you for it being a really good series opener, because I feel like Series 3 takes a shift in tone comparatively to Series 1 and Series 2. I think Series 1 obviously and Series 2 are different from each other, but there is more consistency in the tone of Only Fools and Horses. I can't really explain that very well, but there's like a vibe to Series 1 and 2 that can kind of get lumped in together. But I feel when we get into Series 3, and there's a few things in this episode I'll mention as to maybe why that is, I feel like we are getting more comedy than ever when we start Series 3, and I think a lot of the Series 3 episodes really focus more on trying to make us laugh And I think that this is a good example of it, even though there is some serious subject matter in this episode, really like quite sad stuff, actually, which again, we'll talk about in the episode breakdown. I think it's got a lot of really strong comedic moments in this episode, which again is what I'm looking for my Only Fools and Horses episodes.
Yeah, so as we discussed in the Series 2 overview, John Sullivan was allowed to run a lot more free now with the scripts and stuff. He really felt that he was able to just gain his confidence and stuff here, and didn't worry as much anymore. He would let loose a little bit. So I think you can see it. Like, you can see the increase in the strong comedy. So yeah, and we didn't do the IMDb yet, did we?
No, not yet.
That was 43, so it's halfway between our two rankings. It's. I think the reason it doesn't jump really high for people is it's not the most memorable episode, but a lot of the people's favorite lines come from this episode. So yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Also, Grandad centric, which we love.
Oh yeah, love me a Grandad episode. It's so weird because when I was younger, probably influenced by Dad, I was like, oh, the Grandad episodes. But actually, I love Grandad as a character. I love Leonard Pierce's delivery of his lines. I find Grandad a fantastic character. So yes, I think Dad should rewatch all the Grandad episodes. Yeah. Give him another chance because they're great, actually.
As usual, like all the main lines that I love from this episode come from Grandad. So.
Yes, me too. Yeah. Okay, so with the rankings done, shall we go on to the episode breakdown?
Yeah, let's start. So this episode opens with Del sprucing himself up in the mirror. The camera pans over to Rodney coming out of Grandad's room and telling him to have a nice kip. Turns to Del and tells him that Grandad's legs are still playing him up. So immediately into the plot, Rodney is in his little skinny grey suit that he wears whenever he's serious. And he mentions that Grandad won't be able to come with them to the meeting of the Tenants Association, so we see that's what they're up to. Rodney has some notes on the table. We find out quickly that Del won't be coming with them because he's got a date. Del refers to Rodney's notes and asks him what that's all about. Rodney says it's a list of questions he's going to ask at the meeting. So it seems Rodney is mostly concerned about the lack of police presence on the estate. But we do get the information here that the lifts are out of order on their block, so that's a little note for later. Rodney says,
"Look, I don't care what their excuses are. I'm going to demand more police patrols on this estate."
Not too many, Rodney.
Rodney's making a list of the crimes to present to the association, but he only has Grandad's shopping trolley being stolen from the pram sheds. So this is where Del tells the story of Rita Aldridge being indecently assaulted over by the Adventure Playground.
Last Friday night, she was indecently assaulted over by the Adventure Playground.
Hold on a minute. If this happened on Friday night, how come it's taking her till Wednesday to report it?
Because she didn't know she'd been indecently assaulted until this morning when the bloke's cheque bounced.
I want to say I did not understand that story when I was younger. Obviously now I understand it, but back then I didn't get the whole, I only found out she was indecently assaulted when the bloke's cheque bounced.
I mean, I was going to say you could save that note until the end of the scene because that's part of like how the laughter rises. So I don't know, because like it takes people a minute to get it. That's why the laughter is low at first and then it gets higher. Yeah. I don't know if you want to save that note or not. You can leave it.
No, I mean, I'm just saying I didn't understand it when I was younger because, I didn't really get the whole like paying for sex thing when I was younger.
Going back to what you said, there's a paragraph in the lovely Jubbly book that says that the laughter rose and was so prolonged after this joke because a lot of people gradually got it and carried on laughing that it bled into the next scene. So they had to actually fade the laughter out. This is the first time they ever had to do that. They normally would just leave the laugh track in. But I think you remember the scene where it cuts into the next scene and there's Baz. The laughter does carry on.
Yeah, it does. I thought they were laughing at Baz coughing.
I mean, they do start to laugh at Baz coughing, obviously, because but though a lot of the laughter is just hangover from the other scene.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing about the opening scene. I think this is like the first time we get a real description of how bad the crime is, like where they live. I don't think it's really highlighted very much in series 1 and 2 that the estate itself is quite a dangerous place.
Yeah, there's that reference to the rioting, which comes back in many other episodes in the future, specifically Fatal Extraction. Yeah, you're right. Probably is the first time that they've really hyper-focused on that. So, okay, we'll cut to the town hall. So you can hear that laughter continuing into the next scene as we see Rodney sitting alone in the seating area and one man up front coughing loudly. This is Baz. the current chairman of the Tenants Association. So he was played by actor Ron Pember. Now, he's got a ton of credits on IMDb, but I personally remember him, and so will other British people. He's the taxman for the Outland Revenue in the Red Dwarf episode Better Than Life. So I'm sure there's lots of...
Yeah, so I'm not a Red Dwarf fan, but I know you are. So.
Yeah, I remember him from that. So at this point, it looks like Rodney is the only person to have attended the meeting. He looks around, he seems annoyed, but he's also extremely annoyed by he's annoyed by the extreme coughing from Baz, and he politely points out the sign. So
yeah, I've got to say, can I just say a note here? It makes me so happy that times have changed a lot regarding smoking regulations. Like, I'm so glad people can't smoke indoors anymore. Because, yeah, I used to hate that about going out clubbing and stuff before the smoking ban came in, like 2007, I believe it was, July 2007. For people like me who don't smoke and have always disliked smoking, it was a wonderful thing. But, yeah, you look at these old episodes now and you can't imagine, even though there was no smoking sign, someone sitting in a hall smoking is just unthinkable now.
Well, I remember being a kid before the smoking ban really was, and yeah, there was like the smoking and the non-smoking sections of the restaurants, but every public place like this always smelled very strongly of cigarette smoke, if I remember. Which probably is not the case anymore.
No.
But I feel like him, like the chairman, just sitting there puffing away and ignoring the regulation sign kind of gives us a hint that this association is not very serious.
No, not very serious.
Also, there's no board of people. So we do see somebody arriving there in the background behind Rodney. And it turns out that it's Trigger. And he says,
"How you going, Dave?"
To Rodney as he approaches, which again, zero reaction from the audience. But this is probably the last time that's going to happen, because at this point John Sullivan decided to point out the fact that he's calling him Dave all the time, which is really laying the groundwork for the joke of the future, because we see that they have that conversation and he still calls him Dave afterwards. So Rodney says,
"Trig, why'd you call me Dave? My name's not Dave. My name's Rodney."
So what's Dave? A nickname, right?
No! You're the only one who calls me Dave.
Oh, well, I shall have to get used to calling you Rodney.
Thank you.
Basil, you going to get this meeting started? Me and Dave ain't got all night.
that's important, right? Like, a lot of people remember
very.
that this episode is the time that he addresses this.
Yeah, and I just put, I wonder why he chose to do that now. And as you say, maybe it was just a case of addressing this joke that's been in it till now and not had any laughs, but it's been consistent. And as you say, after this, it does seem to get more of a reaction. So maybe it was a strategic idea to make sure the joke landed better in the future.
Yeah, because it never got a laugh in any of the episodes, especially here. He comes in and says it and they're silent, and you're talking about a whole crowd of people who are clearly laughing their heads off at this episode, and they didn't laugh. So he probably was like, I'm going to try and do this, and then if after that it still doesn't get a laugh, I'll stop.
Yeah,
but he probably is always going to include it as part of Trigger's character. So
yeah.
So following this interaction, Baz tells them he can't start the meeting until the vice chairman shows up. So Rodney asks him how long he's going to be, and Baz says,
"Ooh, could be a hell of a long time, son. He died a fortnight ago."
Died?
Yeah, I love Rodney's reaction to that as well.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's personally upset him, but not like the guy who died.
Yeah, now poor Rodney in this scene, because Rodney is obviously very manipulated in this episode as a whole, but it starts here. He is nominated as the vice chairman. He doesn't want to do it. He puts his little hand up when they say, does anybody object? But yeah, even Trigger uses the classic Del emotional manipulation here, where he says that he is proving that he can't accept any responsibility. And
Del always said you were too immature to accept responsibility. Yeah, I put that down.
Did he? Yeah. And Rodney stands up defiantly and he's like, well, let's see about that. Goes up to the front and becomes the vice chairman. And then straight away, Baz declares his resignation, switches the signs, and Rodney is the lone chairman. It happens very quickly.
Yeah.
And then Baz and Trig go down the pub, which is so sad. Poor little Rodney.
I think that whole sequence is really funny.
It's so funny,
yeah, I just put here that we see, again, Trigger here is pretty smart, the way he decides to use that reverse psychology on Rodney to get him to volunteer to be the vice chairman. So again, we're not into the era of dumb Trigger yet.
No.
Or should I say naive Trigger. I just wanted to mention the end of the scene. I think it's really funny the way that, again, Nick Lyndhurst and the way the camera moves and sort of zooms out on him, and it shows him like progressively getting a bit happier, and then he almost gets cocky, and then he falls off his chair, which is just, it's almost an indication of the way the episode goes for him, actually. It's like, it's good, everything's great, too confident, off the chair.
It's so, also, it's overall cool. Rodney's character, isn't it? Every time he gets slightly cocky, it goes wrong. So him falling out the chair is like a good depiction of that. Yeah.
Yes. agreed.
Anything else before we go down the market?
I find it hard to believe that there isn't anyone else that has concerns about housing and would have turned up to the meeting. I mean, you always get a busybody or like an old lady or something, someone. Like, I just find it like really hard to believe that nobody except for Rodney turned up. Well, but again, maybe because Del has manufactured this, and again, we can talk about this because I'm trying to figure out exactly when Del and Grandad's plan started in this episode when I was watching it. If Del has manufactured this from this point, he may have gone to the trouble of making sure no one else turned up so Rodney would get elected, and he sent Trigger in to, elect him and do all this. It does make sense that would be the case if no one else, as to why no one else turned up.
Well, yeah, because it's like, so Trigger comes down there, but he has no intention of participating in the meeting because, I guess he could have changed his mind when he realized that they couldn't have the meeting because there's only one chair. But he comes down and then he does that little emotional manipulation and then he bails out. So, yeah, is he part of Del's plan? And has Del gone around making sure no one shows up to the meeting? But then wouldn't Del have just gone to the meeting, though, if that was his plan?
Well, no, you see, because Del didn't... Again, Del knew Rodney was going, and then he got himself a date. But at the beginning of the episode... Again, this is like just my theory. Because at the beginning of the episode, Del has already sabotaged the lifts, and we know Grandad is already complaining about his legs. So I have to assume that Del has already put his plan into action before Rodney's even gone to this meeting. So I wonder if Del was like, let's go to this meeting... And knowing that Rodney was going to get elected the chairman and then he was going to use him. I mean, it does seem a bit elaborate, but if Grandad's already complaining about his legs and Del's already sabotaged the lifts, the plan must already be in action, right?
Maybe, yeah, but then he would have also had to include Baz, right? Because Baz, he could have just had Baz help him get the house, but Baz wanted to retire, so maybe he offered Baz like a bribe, and he's like, "Well, I'll get you out if you comply
it could have been
with
that
it."
exactly.
Yeah.
And then Trigger would do anything Del told him. He's a good friend we've mentioned before. So, and the way that he even mentions Del as the way to get Rodney to do it also makes me feel like Del might have had a hand in it. I don't know.
The only thing that seems implausible is that Del would have been able to make sure no one else showed up. Because, like, how does he know who's going to go and stuff?
Well, maybe he told everyone it was cancelled. Or I don't know. Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm just thinking, like, it's quite far-fetched. But I don't know. I mean, how else would this plan work out, like, as perfectly as it does?
Yeah. It doesn't really matter because it never gets addressed in the episode. But, yeah, we do know that there's some manipulation on some level here. So,
yes.
All right, let's move on to the market then. So, cuts to the market scene and we can hear Del before we see him. He's selling oranges down the market. Starting off strong.
Tibbs.
Yeah, Miss Tibbs. Starting off strong in Series 3 with the market scene. We see him interact with a few punters, starting with Miss Tibbs from Faulty Towers.
He's dead!
Well, yeah, this might be a good time to mention. I didn't know that John Howard Davis, who was the head of the light entertainment of the BBC, was the director of Faulty Towers.
Oh, okay.
I only found that out recently. So it totally makes sense now why there's so much crossover. And now we have...
I feel like the BBC had a pool of actors and bit players as well that they kind of shared amongst all of their series in that era.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Miss Tibbs and Miss Gatsby in this episode are the same characters.
Yeah.
As they are in Faulty Towers. Yeah.
Has he got pineapples? Yeah, exactly.
So Miss Tibbs actually takes the oranges. She's happy. So we hear a bit of market patter, like Del's going to do the little performance. So great start. Rodney arrives and Del's annoyed at him for prioritizing his tenants association. So he's keeping up this ruse that he doesn't want Rodney to be in the tenants association. As an audience, we actually see that we think he is actually annoyed. So Rodney mentions Miss Mackenzie here and says she's important and that she liked Rodney.
She's in charge of the housing and welfare down the town hall. She's a very important lady. And she was very impressed with me.
While they're discussing this, a little kid steals an orange and Del throws another one at him, which we hear smash in the background. It says in the script that they all ignore the smash, so they did a pretty good job there.
Yeah.
So that scene cuts together with another part of the market when we see Grandad arriving with the shopping and he walks past a China stand where the owners are looking up, trying to figure out where the orange came from.
Yeah, that's
so
funny.
The argument continues between Del and Rodney says that as the head of the association, he can't be seen down the market hauling crates of oranges around. So we see he's gotten a little bit big for his boots here. But as usual, money gets him to do whatever Del wants him to do.
You want any wages tomorrow?
Where shall I put them?
Grandad slowly approaches in the background. He says he's been getting in something for dinner. I know. So the sympathy hits strong here. We immediately feel really bad for Grandad. He's really hamming it up.
He's talking in his Del boy voice.
Yeah.
All of this
Stiller
episode.
intel. As if anyone would be able to handle it. You just want to take Grandad home and look after him.
Yeah.
So Rodney's obviously sympathetic. It's nice to see that relationship where they're very caring of Grandad instead of just calling him an old git. I mean, it flicks straight away. Like, whenever they're worried, it gets serious. So
Yeah, true.
Rodney offers to drive Grandad home, but he says he's going to walk it off and he leaves. That's when Miss Gatsby comes along and says,
Has he got pineapples?
I think it's just rheumatism.
So the scene fades out on Del doing the market pitch. I don't know if you heard this, but at the very end you hear him say 3 for 25p, 6 for 90.
Yeah, I love it when they mess up. It's like Rodney saying, 1 for the price of 2, 1 for the price of 2 in the second time around. Yeah, that's funny when they mess up the prices. The only thing I said again in this scene, like some confusion about when Del and Grandad cooked up this scheme. I'm not sure when it started, but obviously they're already in it. I also put, how did Rodney know that he had to go and meet Miss Mackenzie, because he was left alone in that room as chairman of the housing association and had no instructions of what to do next, yet he went to meet Miss Mackenzie. So that was a bit interesting how he figured that out. And I do like the exchange where Rodney asks what's for tea.
Do you like haddock pie, Del?
No, I don't.
You got haddock pie.
Because it just shows that Rodney always gets the leftovers or the thing that like Del doesn't want, Rodney's always bottom of the pecking order.
But also, it highlights that Grandad looks after them and does all the cooking, even though he's a terrible cook. It's quite funny. If I was Rodney, I would want to do my own shopping and my own cooking.
But then, I mean, we never really get an indication. I think the first time we ever see like Del cook something is Strained Relations, after Grandad has passed away, and we see that Del's quite a good cook in that episode. So yeah, it is interesting that they don't even try to do the cooking.
And Rodney can't cook at all, can he? Because if it comes back and he's mad when Cassandra doesn't cook for him, so... Okay, we'll move on then. So cut back to the Trotter flat. The flat's in darkness as Del and Rodney come home. We hear Rodney still talking about Miss Mackenzie. Del reminds us again here that the lifts are not working. When Rodney comes in, he stops short, and it says in the script that he's frozen. Rodney doesn't really know what to do. He doesn't immediately run over to Grandad. He waits for Del to react, and then they both run over when they see that Grandad is keeled over on the floor.
Oh, look at this. He ain't even put the shopping away.
This definitely made me panic when I was a kid as well.
Oh, yeah, because I don't think... there's something about the cinematography of that shot as well, the way that they have like Grandad in the foreground, it's on the ground almost looking up at Rodney from like Grandad's perspective, the way the camera's placed. There's something very unsettling about the way it's framed as well. And yeah, like, as you say, we've never seen sort of one of the characters like Grandad. He could die, he's old and stuff. And yeah, like having him collapsed on the floor when they come in. And again, the acting from David Jason and Nick Lyndhurst, like when they see him, is fantastic as well. I was just going to say the way that the comedy is put into this moment is brilliantly done, because it's such a serious thing. And yet we still managed to get a good few jokes out of this before Grandad wakes up.
Yeah, and I was going to just add here that when you're a kid, especially watching this, like I think one of your biggest fears is walking in and finding your grandparents like keeled over, because you always think your grandparents are going to die when you're a kid. So they definitely pull the heartstrings here. There's definitely some jokes they pull over, they run over.
Del, the brandy, kid.
Yeah. No, he ain't been at this.
We feel their worry when Rodney says,
Shall I give him the kiss of life?
I ain't that bad.
one of my favourite lines is here where Grandad says,
I just got up to switch over to Crossroads.
And what happened?
I don't know, dear boy. I didn't see the end of it.
This scene is very significant because Del and Rodney's concern for Grandad is very important to show us how much the love and bond between the family is the heart.
And of course, Del would have known this was all fake, right?
Yeah, I mean, he would have at this point, but you don't know it as an audience member. And this is like that thing that's the heart of the show, as we've talked about before, is the family bond. So we don't know as an audience that it's a joke. And it almost doesn't matter when you look back on it. You still feel like David Jason's love and concern is genuine.
Well, he has to put on a show for Rodney regardless anyway, because obviously he can't let Rodney know that he knows it's fake. So
Leonard Pierce does some great sad voice lines here to generate the sympathy. We feel Del's panic. And this is the first time we ever see inside a Grandad's bedroom. Rodney gets on the blower to Dr. Becker, and we only hear his side of the conversation. Del grabs the phone off of him and impatiently says,
My name is Del Trotter. Now, you don't know me, but we've got a mutual friend. Her name is Rita Aldridge. It's right. And I happen to talk to your good lady wife every day in the market. Right. He's on his way round.
So yeah, you probably wrote this in your notes too, that there's a little contradiction there where he says he doesn't know him because...
Yes, I did make a big note about that.
Yeah, it's in all the trivia on all the pages, so...
I pulled the line from Thicker Than Water, where they have the conversation.
Look, why don't you get some advice on the subject, eh? Go and see Dr. Becker.
No, I can't go and ask him.
Why not?
Well, because he'd know everything then, wouldn't he? I mean, he's the family doctor. He treated Mum, when she was ill, and I don't want to have him thinking that of her.
And I'm like, yeah, how the hell did you not know Del if you treated their mom when she was sick? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I would say that's just a mistake with the way that the line might have been written without any forethought, or the way it was delivered, maybe. You shouldn't have said, "You don't know me." You should have said, "Hi, Dr. Becker, it's Del."
Yeah,
but then maybe he didn't want to threaten the doctor.
Well, he implies that
but he is threatening him.
He's paying for a prostitute, hence the mention of Rita Aldridge, and then he's going to tell his wife. So, and again, if he knows the prostitute he's sleeping with and his wife really well, he'd know Dr. Becker, or Del. Dr. Becker would know Del. I mean, it's just a bit unlikely. I agree. Maybe
it's just a goof.
Yeah, just a goof. It's okay. But I'm actually curious as well. What do our listeners think the illness was that Dr. Becker assumed that Rodney had?
Yeah, my name is Trotter. We live on the estate. Oh, you remember? Well, could you... Has what cleared up? No, I never had anything like that.
Got to be something to do with his genitals.
Yes, it's always something like, something about like male impotence or something like that maybe. But yeah, I'm just curious.
He's only supposed to be a baby, so...
But something extreme.
It would say it's something embarrassing.
As it cleared up. So it's something that can be cured, I suppose. Male impotence
probably
can't be.
Fungal infection around his genitals.
Yes, could be herpes.
But please submit your thoughts below.
I just want to say as well, just a particular line, because you mentioned about the way that Grandad delivers those lines when he says,
"I just come over bad, Rodney. Me legs give way. Them stairs will be the death of me."
I always used to feel really sorry for him when he said that line. That always pulled at my heartstrings.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how viewers felt watching this when it was on, before Leonard Pierce died. I guess maybe there's a massive amount of sadness that we feel every time Grandad's ill, because we know Leonard Pierce was ill in real life, and we know that he dies in within a year of this. But still, I don't know. I think his delivery and his performance is classic Grandad generation of sympathy. I think it's great.
Yes,
yeah,
I agree.
All right, so we'll cut to Nelson Mandela presumably a few hours later, because Dr. Becker's seen Grandad. So the scene begins with Rodney holding and stroking Grandad's hat, which, again, everyone knows that happens at Grandad's funeral, so...
But it's not Grandad's hat. It's the vicar's hat. But
no, that's not Grandad's hat. This time it is.
Yeah, they use Grandad's hat a lot, I notice. Yeah, like whenever they think about Grandad being sick, they always seem to zone in on the hat.
Grandad is the symbol of... the hat is the symbol of Grandad.
Symbol of Grandad, yeah.
So yeah, especially when Del places the hat on the chair as if Grandad's sitting there. There's a little chuckle from the audience there, but I think they're not sure, like the audience at this point are not sure... Are we actually really sad here, or are we happy? I think they're not sure.
Well, for all we know, at the beginning of this scene, he's died already. I mean, there's no indication he hasn't,
And also, we don't know that they're not painting this as the beginning of a Grandad's leaving the show. Perhaps some of the viewers might have thought that. So Dr. Becker comes out of the room looking very serious. He's a very scary looking doctor. I wouldn't have wanted him as my doctor.
He looks a bit intimidating. I agree.
Well, when he speaks, he says that Grandad needs plenty of sleep and lots of fresh air. And Rodney breaks the tension by saying,
"Right, we could put his bed on the balcony."
Fresh air. Fresh air. Haven't you noticed all the juggernauts and buses smoking away past this place? The only fresh air my granddad gets is when he's listening to the Archers.
So Del says the only fresh air that Grandad gets is when he's listening to the Archers. So this reminded me of Mum when we were kids, because she used to listen to the Archers.
Yeah, I remember hearing that in the kitchen all the time when Mum used to be in there.
So I looked it up, and it is actually the longest running radio show in the world by number of episodes, because it has over 20,000 episodes.
Oh my God.
Now, if you were going to go I think I'll do a rewatch or a re-listen. 20,000 episodes. All right, well, that is the world's longest podcast possibility.
That would be a hell of a binge, wouldn't it, if you had to binge all of that?
Now, statistically, could you do a Archers podcast in your lifetime? No, probably not. Not unless you recorded one episode a day. So then we see Del turns the conversation to their living situation, and he gets quite a lot of validation from Dr. Becker. They discuss Grandad's legs. Dr. Becker says,
What about his legs?
Oh, don't worry. He's got legs like Nijinsky.
Nijinsky's a racehorse.
Rodney tries to correct him by saying that he means Václav Nijinsky, who was regarded as the greatest male dancer of the 20th century, the earlier 20th century. Dr. Becker actually did mean the racehorse. So Dr. Becker just says that they need ground floor accommodation, and he wants to help by writing a letter to the council recommending they be moved. So here we get a date reference because Del says,
You did that for my mum back in 1962, and they moved us here.
And again, how did you not know Del?
Right, exactly. You did that for my mum. And Del was like 16 at the time. And that actually does match up with what happens in Rock and Chips. I can't remember if Dr. Becker's in Rock and Chips, but the dates are definitely off. Because in Rock and Chips, they move in. And then Rodney is born in Nelson Mandela. As we know, is referred back to in Yuppie Love. Rodney says he was born there.
I was born here, yeah.
So going off the date that Joan supposedly died in Yellow Peril, that would mean that Rodney would have been 2 when she died, which I think we established he wasn't probably 2, but...
Is he like 4 or something when she died?
But it doesn't matter that much right now because we'll do the continuity sum up at the end of Series 3. But there's a date reference in this. Dr. Becker says it would help if they had the support of the head of the Tenants Association.
Well, the only other thing that would hold a lot of sway with the council's housing department would be support from the chairman of the Tenants Association. Now, who is the chairman of the association these days?
Now, I've got to say, I think all of this was rehearsed by Del and Dr. Becker. Like, it's just too, like, I think there's a possibility that Dr. Becker is in on this because he examined Grandad and said that he was exhausted. So Grandad was faking it. So I don't know, like, maybe he's just not a very thorough doctor. But, I mean, and obviously if an old person says that their legs are hurting, you're probably not going to question that. But even so, it's like, yeah, I wonder if Dr. Becker was also in on this because it's just the fact that he immediately goes to, oh, we need the chairman of the Tenants Association. It's like, oh, it happens to be Rodney. And I also thought Nick Lyndhurst's, Rodney's reaction was very interesting here because I said he gets like very upset and I guess he knows that all the responsibility will fall on him or he feels bad about it because he knows he's going to say no, but like, you know, he gets really upset when he goes shopping. Like, it's just I don't really get that reaction. What do you think about that?
Isn't that more into the bedroom?
No, that's before. That's when they start talking. Because when he says, who is the chairman of the... He's already gone into the kitchen with the shopping.
Right. I think when he comes out the kitchen and he's like holding his head and he doesn't really register what Del says because he says they need the support of the head of the tenant association and then Del puts his arm around him and starts saying, good boy, good boy. Like, it's almost as if Rodney is too tired and disoriented to really realise what's happening at that point because...
But he says it's me. He goes, it's me.
But he doesn't even go, it's me. Oh my God, I can help. Like, he just kind of says it's sort of tired. So I think
That's what I mean. That's why I wonder if he actually was like, oh no, it's me because I can't help because it would be a conflict of interest because that's what we find out in the next scene. So I just wonder if that's why his reaction was so sad rather than, as you say, it would be like, great, that's me. So I can help us. Like, I can help Grandad because he seems like he's like, oh shit, it's me. And therefore I can't help. That would explain his reaction more.
I always read that as he was too tired and exhausted from what happened to Click at the time that they were kind of saying, hey, you've got to deal with this. He comes out looking like he barely heard it.
Oh, yeah, no, I thought he was avoiding it because he goes into the kitchen like as soon as they start talking about it and sounds really upset. So I thought that was...
Yeah. The fact that they send him into the kitchen might have been meant to show that he didn't hear, that they were sort of saying that what would help is the support of the Tenants Association. Like maybe he was only supposed to hear the end line, who is the head of the Tenants Association? And he's like, me, without realising that Becker said... he needs the support. The way that it's set up is like he doesn't fully react until the next scene, so I feel like maybe he hasn't absorbed the information yet.
Maybe let us know what you think in the comments about that, people, because I always thought it was that Rodney already saw the direction of where the conversation was going because they needed to move and he knew that would fall on him and therefore he dismissed himself out of guilt knowing that he wouldn't be able to help, and then his reaction was quite sad. But let us know what you think, how you interpret that.
Yeah. Any other notes on that scene before we go to Grandad's bedroom?
I think I said it looks like Del just gets the idea here now, like, good boy. That
to the audience,
do this
yes,
scheme,
it does,
to the audience. Yeah. But obviously, I don't know when this plot started. I'm trying to sort of figure it out throughout the whole episode. But yes, that's all I have.
Yeah, right. I know, yeah. And I don't think we have a definitive answer, so other people's opinions will be helpful here. We fade into Grandad's bedroom. I think this is quite well known, I'll just say this before we start the scene, that this scene took a very long time to film because the cast couldn't stop laughing. David Jason said, however many times we did that scene, we couldn't do it for laughing. We ended up doing it about 3 or 4 times, and in the end, Ray Butt was becoming seriously annoyed.
It doesn't surprise me because you can see how many times in the one that made it to air, David Jason's face is cracking up like throughout the whole of that scene. He has so many little smirks, and where he's almost laughing, you can see.
Yeah, he said that if you look carefully, you can tell that they were laughing quite a lot. And as you mentioned in the intro episode, that's specifically the Lourdes line.
We could take him to Lourdes.
Lourdes? Lourdes? He don't even like cricket.
Right after he says that, it cuts and David Jason's looking at Leonard Pierce and he laughs.
Yes.
So there are some bits that ended up getting into the final cut. I'm sure that they couldn't avoid it because of that. And another note before we start the scene about this, which is quite sad, which is that Leonard Pierce told the News of the World in a December 1983 interview that it was very difficult to film this scene because it brought back memories of his own health scare a few years ago. And he mentioned in that interview that playing a supposed deathbed scene reminded him of a time when it wasn't so funny. Just in case any of the listeners are wondering, we are planning to discuss Leonard Pierce in a little more depth at the end of Series 3. So I'm not just brushing over his health issues. I just want to be able to focus more deeply on that at the end of Series 3 when we get to the actual transition between the Grandad and Albert characters. So Grandad is sleeping in bed and the camera pans back. We see Del is keeping a vigil. He doesn't know what that means, but he is.
I didn't know either when I was younger, so...
So he's just sitting there with Grandad. So Rodney comes in with a little brown bag. He's bought him some oranges, which is hilarious because we can see the oranges crates piled up in Grandad's bedroom. So from the conversation, we can deduce that Rodney has said he's not going to help because he doesn't want to appear self-serving. And Del is not concerned about that. He gives Grandad a slice of orange and says,
Brain went years ago. Now his legs are gone. There's only the middle bit of him left.
Grandad stirs, and again, Leonard Pierce does an amazing job of breaking all of our hearts when he comes across so helpless.
I said I love how he hammed it up. It was fantastic because some of it comes across as really sincere, and some of it comes across as really over the top and dramatic, and it's just a wonderful mixture in the whole scene.
He starts this intimate conversation with Rodney where he tells him to put his hand under his pillow, and he finds his granddad's old cigarette case, and he tells Rodney the story.
The bullet was aiming straight for my granddad's heart, but he had that cigarette case in his breast pocket, and the bullet hit that instead.
It saved his life.
Well, not really. See, the bullet ricocheted up his nose and blew his brains out. My gran always said it were lucky.
It's a little bit like, again, the stories in It Never Rains. No matter what Grandad's stories start out like, they always end up, just like Albert in the future, they end up not being heroic.
Not happy ending.
Yeah,
have a really funny ending at the end. Yeah, the end of the story it always has a funny line. Yeah, I agree. And this is hilarious. The way that even that line is delivered is really funny. So, but then we get the hammed up bit where he says,
"It'll be something to remember me by."
So Grandad says that Rodney should keep the case always and delivers that. This is where Del's anger pipes back up and he says he won't let Rodney forget what he's done. Oh, poor Rodney. They really ham it up with Grandad's little speech about the garden as well.
I could have grown some flowers. I've never ever had a garden. Still, what you've never had, you never miss, eh, Del boy?
Even the audience don't seem to know how to react to that bit. There's like this awkward, like,
I think, you can kind of hear one audience member kind of go, ooh. I don't know if you heard that.
It's a very interesting reaction to that.
I think that might have been a click moment for somebody in the audience. Like, oh, look what he's doing. He's trying to manipulate Rodney. But they don't know he's not really ill, but they do know at this point that they are manipulating Rodney.
Yes.
So Rodney leaves the room because he's so upset.
It would have worked on me too.
Yeah, and I actually hear when he says,
welcome back, you're one of the family again.
Like that.
Yeah, it's so harsh, isn't it?
It's harsh, but it's also very telling that they, you've got to do dirty stuff to remain part of the family unit, which is kind of important to show that how loyalty is very important to the Trotters. And then the scene ends with a really great line, which is,
Del boy, I'd like to be cremated.
Well, you'll have to wait till morning because they'll be closed now.
I was going to say that part is the first time I think you really see that Del and Grandad are plotting together, because Del looks at him like, you have just gone over the top there.
Yeah.
Like the way he looks at him is very sort of like, dial it down a bit, love.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the look he gives him.
And Rodney's not in the room, so...
Exactly, yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say earlier when he's escorting him into the room after they found him collapsed on the floor, and it's just Del and Grandad on his own, and he's saying,
No need to call the doctor, Del boy. I'll be all right.
No, you just shut up. It's nothing to do with you.
But they carry on like normal. Like Del's really concerned about him at that point, even though they're already scheming and Rodney's not in earshot. So yeah. I don't know.
All right, so we'll cut to maybe the next day at Nelson Mandela House. We're not sure exactly, but we can assume. Del comes into the flat in a hurry and we see oranges all over the floor. Why are the oranges all over the floor? He yells to Rodney that they need to clean up before that old biddy from the council arrives. But it turns out that she's already there and she's in Grandad's room. So Rodney's back in his suit and he comes out with Miss Mackenzie. So Miss Mackenzie was played by Sandra Payne, who had a lot of acting credits listed on IMDb. Notably, she was in a show called The Newcomers that was on in the 60s, and another show called Triangle that was on in the 80s. So she probably would have been quite a familiar face to people watching. Del obviously likes her right away. And he grabs her hand and pulls her quite roughly into the chair. And he offers her a pina colada. Now, is this the first time we hear Del mention a pina colada?
I think it might be, yeah, because that's like the signature drink. That's why That's why I tried a pina colada for the first time, because I always heard Del talking about them when I was 18, because I didn't have a drink before I turned 18.
Yeah. Right. Del well and truly turns it on with Margaret. He does all the usuals, tells her...
Please, call me Margaret.
Margaret? Margaret? Do you know that is my most favourite name?
Oh, thank you.
They're pretending to be interested in all the same things, lying and saying they have the same background in dance. So when he hears that, he tries to bring up Nijinsky again, and we get the classic line.
Actually, I was thinking of getting a couple of tickets, for one of the shows.
Derek, Nijinsky died in 1950.
Did she?
Nijinsky was a man.
So luckily she's too distracted with the paperwork to think very much of it. So she says that their application has been approved. And she says here that she's aware a lot of people are self-serving, but Rodney is different. He cares.
And he really does. And that's the sad thing.
That's quite important, yeah, because he actually does. Like, everything he's doing is genuine. And he did have good intentions. So Margaret's seeing the true colours of Rodney here, which is a shame. Because the whole thing gets kind of hijacked and ruined by Del, as usual.
Yeah.
But it seems like Margaret's interested in Rodney. But yeah, Del literally shoves Rodney out of the way so he can show Margaret out. And we see her look back at Rodney as she leaves. So I think Margaret actually liked Rodney.
So I was going to say, just before you go on to the next bit, Del putting the hand on the knee thing again. He does this a lot with all the women he's trying to hit on when he says,
"Oh, just say thank you to the nice lady."
Really? There's no need.
It's pretty uncomfortable, that bit, actually, yeah, because it's a little bit so high up the leg and very close. Yeah.
He does it on quite a few occasions before this as well. Like every time he's hitting on a woman, he seems to go for the knee and the thigh.
And I never thought anything of it when I was a kid. So I'm thinking, because now like the culture is a little bit different and women feel a bit more able to speak out about when they feel consent with touching and stuff. He's very forward with the touching. And I think it is a little bit too much here.
Agreed.
Yeah, so Del tries to hit on Margaret in the entryway room, but she leaves anyway. And Del says,
"Well, goodbye."
Hey, no, not goodbye, Margaret. No, just bonjour.
Is that the first time he uses bonjour as a goodbye?
I think so, yeah. Like, I'm not sure if I can remember that or not, but...
Because, again, that becomes a huge recurring joke in later years.
Yeah, right. So he goes back inside and we get a little impression of Del here from Rodney. So that's like a flip on what we got in this series opener for series 2.
Oh, yeah, she'll chat, yeah. Oh, I'm a choreographer, are you? Well, of course, I've always wanted to be in the medical profession myself.
Boy, cut that out, will you?
So we can see they love mocking each other with the little impressions. It's so funny.
And it's always when they're hitting on women that they do the impression.
Yeah, because they do both act differently around women. But So this is where we get the reveal, like, from the audience side, that the whole thing was a scam, because Grandad just comes out the room and says,
Have we got it, Del?
Yeah, of course we've got it, Grandad. Look, we move in next week. Hey, my old man said
And this, I just want to explain to the side note for the listeners, is the reason that we chose this song as our intro for Series 3 is because we could not think of any of the songs in Series 3 we could use. So you might be a bit confused as to why this, and it's not even like their version, it's the version we got off the internet to play, but that's why we chose this song. It's from this episode. So yeah, just want to explain that.
So yeah, Rodney comes along in the background and sarcastically asks Grandad,
We feeling a little bit better, are we, Grandad?
This is where he realises he's been stitched up. So Del says he couldn't tell him because
you're full of principle, aren't you?
Which is true. But Rodney gives up the argument pretty quickly, honestly, because they justify it. He says the stairs probably were a bit much for Grandad, and here we learn that Del is also responsible for lifts breaking down.
Yeah, this is where I get the confusion about when this all started. But I've got to say, I do agree with Rodney that Grandad probably eventually, if not now, would have had trouble going up and down the stairs. And I know that Del is responsible for the lifts breaking in this episode, but it's implied that they break all the time in other episodes as well. So I think it is fair what Rodney tries to justify what happened, that Grandad would need ground floor accommodation at some point, and this is better for him. So he's right.
Yeah, and for anybody who questions in Time on Our Hands, like how Del knew how to switch off the lift, if you watch these old episodes, you know he knows how to switch off the lift.
And so does Rodney, so he should know in Time on Our Hands.
Right. I know, yes, that's true. You stopped it.
We're jumping a little bit ahead there, but...
What are you talking about? So the doorbell rings and Del gets himself out of this situation quickly because Margaret is back. So she says she felt bad because Del wouldn't be able to celebrate without her. So now it's a little weird because she's like, she wants to go out with Del.
Yeah. I mean, I got the impression she thought he was a dumb guy, in the previous scene, and then suddenly she's almost kissing him in the scene. So.
Maybe she really genuinely did think he just wanted to go out and celebrate, but it feels like she makes her come across as naive.
Well, he goes in for a kiss, and she leans in to kiss him before the reveal of Grandad. So
yeah, because he gets himself ready to go out. He thinks he's on a winner, but Grandad ruins everything by coming into the entryway with a big cigar hanging out of his head.
Don't forget your scarf.
He couldn't have been more not ill, could he? He had a big cigar hanging out of his mouth. Even his accent, the way he talked, was very oh yeah, I'm all good. It's just he couldn't have looked less ill if he tried, compared to what he looked like earlier. So
that's the thing. I mean, they always kind of do this. It's a very classic Trotter thing. They put so much effort into building something up, and then they ruin it in a really silly way.
Oh, like Albert dancing after he gets healed by the massager.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty reminiscent here. So
yeah, I
just wanted to say that if you didn't know what he meant by put the chub on, it's the lock on the inside of the door. So it says don't put the chub on.
Oh right, yeah, I actually didn't know what that was.
Yeah, nor did I, but I figured and I looked it up and that's what it is. So, so Margaret's very disgusted when she sees Grandad walking fine. So she takes away the offer of the bungalow. It all happens so quickly. It happens in less than a minute.
So fast, yeah.
Rodney comes in as well, so he kind of incriminates himself, even though he says, I believed me. He wasn't actually in on it, but it doesn't kind of matter at this point because Margaret thinks that he was.
I assume you'll be resigning, Mr. Chairman?
Ends that storyline because we might have wondered what's Rodney doing in the future, but he's definitely resigned already as chairman of the Tenants Association. So the episode ends with Del thinking he's still going to take Margaret out.
It's unbelievable, really.
Any other notes on that scene before we go to the credits? Because I had a note on the credits.
I'm just thinking what the joke that Rodney, it's near the beginning of the scene when Del's talking about, I think it's the choreography, and he's saying oh yeah, I wanted to be in the medical profession too, and then Rodney corrects him and then he corrects himself again. I think I mentioned in a previous episode that trope where Del starts confidently talking about something and then Rodney completely undermines him in front of the person, and then Del goes, oh yeah, I know, I know that, it's just, and then carries on. So yeah, that was done again in this episode. And then I also wanted to say it really annoys me that Del didn't say to them when he opened the door to say he was going out, Miss Mackenzie's here.
Wait, listen, I'm off out. I don't know what time I'm going to be back, but don't put the chub on, all right?
Yeah, right.
If that's all it would have taken, for it to not happen the way it did. And I think how different would the show be if they'd gone to the ground floor bungalow accommodation? It would have changed so many things. I mean, all this, all the stuff about the estate and everything in later episodes is used quite a lot. Sort of the location where they live, Yuppie Love, as you mentioned earlier, Fatal Extraction, like all these episodes that are really focused around the estate. And if they'd gone and moved to one of these little bungalows, it would have been a completely different show. So
yeah, I think as viewers, we do know that wasn't going to end up working out.
Yeah, of course. But he does say as well that they fooled Dr. Becker. That's something else. So I guess Dr. Becker wasn't in on it. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, honestly, as a doctor going for a house call, they don't bring much with them. They don't exactly have sophisticated stuff. So yeah, if Grandad was lying there and saying his legs were killing him, he doesn't diagnose him with anything more serious than exhaustion. So it is quite possible that Becker wasn't in on it. It just seems too perfect that he says, "Oh, you should get the support of the Tenants Association."
Yeah, it does. That's what I mean. It feels like it's very contrived. But then maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I said I really struggled to figure out when the scam started and who was actually involved in the scam in this episode. So again, maybe people can tell us in the comments what their theory is for that, because I really can't figure it out.
Be very interesting to hear other people's views on that. So yeah, just a note about the credits here, because I noticed that there's no applause and laughter over the credits. So it cuts off and it just goes to the song. But this was a significant series for end credits. So it's the only series to feature the hand-drawn looking elements, like the job lot and the for sale signs. They actually had
we use on our podcast logo.
Right, yeah. So they had tasked graphic designer Mick Rolfe with adding these, and he was told to make it look like something the Trotters would make themselves. And they were actually only featured in 7 episodes, so just series 3. And that's it. So
it's so weird because I really associate Only Fools and Horses with that black and white end credits, but it's just this series, right?
It says that. I mean, they're always black and white, but not with this design. Like I think
not with the little doodles and stuff.
It even says it in the Lovely Jubbly anniversary book that this design is synonymous with the show. Like if you ask most people, they'd probably be like, "Yeah, no, they're always there." But like they're not. The credits do change, but like I think we sort of forget, like that's what people remember. So but that's all I had. So let's move on to our awards.
And guess what? He's only one.
Okay, so as always, we have 3 awards to announce this week, and we're going to start off with Plonker of the Week.
Don't be a plonker.
So for the Plonker of the Week, we each nominate a plonker, and we'll discuss and decide who wins. So, dude, I think you'll probably have the same plonker as me, but let's see. Who's your plonker?
I don't know. Let's see. My plonker is Del.
Yes, mine too.
Okay, yeah. It's getting a bit too obvious.
What's your reason?
Just because of, the scheme getting cooked up in the first place, I kind of see that it could have worked. And it did work. Like, there's no denying that. So it's not really about the scheme. It's just about the way that it, gets messed up. Yeah, at the end. Like, there's also another point that I didn't make, is that bit where he holds one door and opens the other.
Rodney just gives up.
Yeah, you would expect that when he went back to the door, Rodney would be standing there, angry. Or why
did Rodney also shouting at him when he goes, and then the door closes, and Rodney suddenly stops shouting?
Why doesn't Rodney just storm into the entryway? Like that would have actually.
Also, the doorbell rang just after Miss Mackenzie left. I'd have been a bit suspicious that would have been her.
Yeah, right. But still, Del is the reason it gets messed up at the end, because he could have just said, like you said, Miss Mackenzie's back. Shh, be quiet.
Yeah.
But so they actually lost everything in the space of a minute because of just one omission, even though the rest of the plan had been pretty flawless. So
almost too perfect the way it worked out, with Rodney getting elected the chairman and all that sort of stuff, exactly as it needed to be. Yeah, and I also think because Del, he had no problem using Rodney.
No,
and taking advantage of Rodney's good nature, which again is not a nice thing to do.
Yeah, and he's constantly reminding Rodney that he has to be more of an asshole to do well in life, which is a shame because again, you see Rodney in this episode is very vulnerable. He's very caring of Grandad. He really wants to take this Tenants Association job seriously. Miss Mackenzie actually likes him for his true nature, and all of these things are destroyed by Del, who points out that to be a member of the family, he has to be a slime, basically.
I mean, and actually, even I mean, Del is definitely the orchestrator of this plan. So, of course, Del is the flunker. But, I mean, Grandad letting Rodney think he was dying is also really harsh because he implied he's on his deathbed, something to remember me by,
right.
So, and if you don't help me, I'm going to die. I mean, what kind of horrible pressure is that, you know? So, yeah, I agree. But yes, Del is the one who concocted all this, presumably. So, Del is this week's Plonker of the Week.
Nothing further to say on the subject.
Woo! Well done, Del.
So, this week, Jenny is going to award the best line of this episode. So, you've got quite a few options for this one, dude. So, what did you think is the best line of this episode?
Yeah, actually, I have quite a lot of options, So, but in the end, I decided on...
Del boy, I'd like to be cremated.
Well, you'll have to wait till morning because they'll be closed now.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Did you have a few written down that you liked?
Actually, no, because as you say, there's so many we mentioned throughout the episode. I do think the conclusion of Grandad's story is very good.
Yeah, that's another good honourable mention, Doesn't work as well on its own, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this week Heather has chosen the best moment of the episode. What did you choose for best moment?
Yeah, now again, this one is a difficult one because I think the episode on a whole works very well, but to pick like an individual moment, I did struggle a bit. So I have two for different reasons. So the first one I chose as a comedic reason, and that is, of course, when, did we get it, Del? Of course we got it. We move in next week, my old man. And then jumping around. And then the end of that bit where Gwenda goes, a dillied and dallied, dallied and dillied. I just think that's really funny. That whole sequence where they're dancing is, very funny. So I think that's a really good moment of the episode. But I also have got to say, the speech where Grandad talks about never having a garden.
Yeah.
I think that's a really lovely moment in the episode because, again, even the audience don't really know how to react to that. And it's so touching.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, to hear him talk about that because, I think, you go through life never having something and it's actually right what he says, what you never had, you never miss. But at the same time, it doesn't mean you don't want that thing. So that's a very meaningful moment. Even though it's a scam, it is a meaningful moment and it's very well performed by Leonard Pierce. And those two moments for very different reasons are what I think are the best moments.
I just thought, perhaps another good contender for best line really is she didn't know she'd been indecently assaulted until this morning when the bloke's check bounced. That's probably a more memorable one, but I think Grandad should have the best line for this episode. But I agree that's... I think that's also another good contender.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of choices for best line, which is nice because the last episode we reviewed, there weren't any really. So
yeah. Now, I was going to add here that if you have your own favourite best moments and best lines, please drop them below. And also, if you want to nominate any for future episodes so that we can consider them and mention them, we will. Because I know everybody has their favourites, and I would hate to think that we would talk the whole time and then not say somebody's favourite line or moment, because I notice that happens to me when I'm listening to TV recaps and I'm like, why didn't they mention that bit? That's my favourite bit. So you can always contribute and we will mention it. No problem.
Yeah, that also goes for the rankings. We absolutely encourage people to rank all 64 episodes themselves and let us know what your ranking was for each episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts and discuss that in the comments.
Because there's bound to be some times when we're close, but there's also times when we're so different that I find that's the most interesting. So we would love to hear
absolutely. I mean,
people's.
Jenny and I guess, growing up together, watching the series together, we probably have a lot of similarities of what our favourite episodes are. But I do think there will be some stark contrasts at some points where, Jenny's put something really high up and it's quite low down on mine. I mean, actually, it has happened already a couple of times, I think, in series 1 and series 2.
So far, the two biggest ones have been Heather's ranking for Losing Streak and mine, and then Ashes to Ashes for me, which we talked about in our series 2 wrap up. So let's hear everyone's. It'll be fun. So
okay, so drink up, we're leaving.
So that about wraps it up again for this week. Please consider giving us a like or a follow, and we'd love to read your comments and emails. Hang on till the very end of this episode for our contact info. Join us next week when we'll be discussing Series 3, Episode 2, Healthy Competition. Until then...
Au revoir, listeners. If you like what you hear and want to contact us, you can email us at longlivehookeystreetpodcast@gmail.com. All one word, no spaces. Bonjour.